You're listening to Solera Innovation Labs, where automotive experts from around the world discuss technology trends in mobility and debate tomorrow's rules of the road. Whether you're a technician, a dealer, an appraiser, a car lover, or anything in between, we'll discuss topics that will keep you up to date and help you and your business win. Welcome everyone to Ready, Set, Go. It's Neil here in the studio to talk about vehicle diagnostics and all of the opportunities and challenges that come with the new complex vehicles on the road today. With me is my guest, Jim Fish, who's been active in the industry for nearly 30 years. Jim is currently a partner in the Innovatrium and a professor of entrepreneurial studies at Wayne State University. He has served as Chief Innovation Officer with Bosch and currently holds 22 global patents in the fields of automotive diagnostics and software business processes. He's consulted for DTE Energy, spent a decade as a product engineer at Ford, and that's only half of his official bio. This guy knows what he's talking about. Welcome to the podcast, Jim.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Excellent. So today we're going to talk about vehicle diagnostics, a very hot topic in the industry today. But I thought we'd maybe kind of start at the basics of what diagnostics is. I mean, we hear a lot in the industry about, pre-post scan and calibration and vehicle electronics and, what at the core of it, what is the word diagnostic? What does it mean to the industry?
Yeah, essentially, diagnostics is the interrogation of a vehicle for conditions that aren't as they're supposed to be. Vehicles are very complex devices these days with lines of code in them that far exceed the space shuttle, as an example, if anybody's seen the diagnostic indications. Just my own F-150, it's aluminum F-150, has 28 vehicle modules in it and 2 data buses in it that are controlling various systems. And to interrogate, all of those systems for something that may be amiss is an increasingly complicated task. And that's what today's solutions are focused on, is interrogating those vehicles and all of the data buses and all of the modules in them to ensure that everything is okay.
Okay, so how has this really been changing over the course of the years? I mean, from a layman's terms, and I'm going to kind of go back to some of the basics. We've had check engine lights in cars for years and years and years. So how is this different than what the check engine light of the past was?
Yeah, essentially, it all started back in the 1970s with the Clean Air Act, and the U.S. government kind of led the world, and Europe followed suit in understanding some standard understanding of the emissions control of a vehicle, if you will. So these are standardized, and it led us to the 1996 introduction of OBD2, or onboard diagnostics, the second generation, and that is with us to this day. So the check engine light that's really only those systems and modules that directly control emissions. So you're talking powertrain controllers, you're talking engine controllers, the systems that result in a vehicle emitting pollutants into the air. And the OEMs have gone anything beyond there that is not legislated to their own proprietary protocols on the vehicle, their own proprietary architectures, and that's what we call in the world of diagnostics the swamp. So walking into the swamp, It's a foreign land to everyone. It's different for everyone. So that's quite a challenge. And only a high-end professional tool can perform these. However, there's increases in technology, processing costs continue to come down, and there's a few solutions out there that can actually interrogate all of these systems at a reasonable cost. You may have thought of some of these devices that you can buy on eBay for $30, and is that good enough? Those are only doing engine codes in general. So that's really kind of the difference in what's been happening in the industry most recently.
Because I think there's a misnomer on consumers, on vehicle owners. If my check engine light isn't on, then everything is working as it should, right? And to summarize, the check engine light is only the emission controlled systems, right? So as long as emissions is good, then the check engine light is going to be off. But that doesn't mean that there aren't underlying codes, right?
Yeah, if you have a more recent car, you're going to have other lights that may be indicated, supplemental restraint systems, or SRS, and which is included in your airbags. You have ABS that can light up. You have traction control systems that can light up. None of those are legislated. That's all really at the choice of the OEM. And that group of lights are called the MIL, or malfunction indicator light or lamp family. But there are many, many other codes. I'll tell you right now, on my truck, I have a running board error on my vehicle, and that doesn't illuminate a light at all.
Right.
So there's oftentimes we find up to 50% of the time of a vehicle interrogation, you're going to find a code on that vehicle, which means something is amiss 50% of the time.
Right.
That does not illuminate a light.
And so the more and more computer systems enter the world of mobility of automobiles, the more we're going to have more diagnostic issues versus just physical issues when we're thinking about repairing a damaged vehicle, right?
Yeah, certainly. Anytime a vehicle is damaged, I mean, kind of the gloves are off as to what's going on with that vehicle electronically. Right. Many of these systems can calibrate themselves. In fact, many of these systems can understand there's intelligence in these systems, but to ensure that everything is back normal and talking, there's not going to be an indicator lamp for this. In my running board lamp, you can pull the connector on that, and there's going to be no indication that anything is amiss without a scan tool and interrogating that module to understand what's going on with the vehicle.
Got it. And today, with more and more safety systems being involved, now we're kind of reaching a new level where it's not just a convenience item, right? Like your running board would be a convenience item, but if they're the forward camera or any of the side, lane departure camera systems, if anything of that sort has issues, now we're getting into kind of the liability of safety of a vehicle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Safety is continually coming under the control of the vehicle. There's e-brake systems which are mandated, in addition to lane departure warnings or lane control, adaptive cruise control. So those are when we talk about safety systems, those are exactly the type of systems we're talking about. And many times there will be codes on these that are not necessarily indicated.
Okay. Gotcha. So vehicles are more complex. The codes underlying aren't necessarily, exposed to the dashboard. And so the only way to really understand what's going on is to kind of interrogate and understand.
Yep, that's exactly right. And interrogate all the systems.
Got it. So, there's a lot of terms thrown around in the industry, and I think a lot of times they're kind of confused and commingled. So you have, pre-scanning and post-scanning and diagnostics and, the actual electronics repair and the calibration. What are the differences between these? Can you walk us through when you have a damaged vehicle, what are kind of the different stages of diagnosing and diagnostics?
Yeah, from a functional perspective, a pre-scan and a post-scan electronically is the same thing. It's an interrogation of the vehicle,
okay.
Checking for conditions. Calibrations is going to be something that is an extensive process that requires additional equipment as you calibrate cameras, sonic detectors. I have a drone. I just had to calibrate my drone the other day, and it was quite involved. It has cameras on it for navigation, and it reminded me of vehicles that need calibrating and how complicated that process can be. And then it's important to do the pre-scan to understand what is the condition of the vehicle as it comes in, and post-scan to ensure that you're returning a vehicle that is as it's intended to operate and in a safe condition back into the hands of the vehicle owner.
Got it. Documentation on the way in and documentation on the way out.
That's correct.
Yeah. And one of the analogies I like to think about is kind of when you go into the doctor's office, right? So when you go into the doctor's office, first thing that they do is not order an MRI. They're going to take your blood pressure. They're going to listen to your lungs. They're going to, take your temperature. So kind of the understanding the basics of what's going on the inside, while they're also physically inspecting what's going on the outside is the intake process before they determine what the next steps are, right?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. When you come in to the hospital, they don't throw you into the machines right away. I mean, they are taking your pulse, right? That's a simple thing, and taking that pulse in your vitals, if you will. I think the other thing in the case of the collision industry is understanding what is the scope of the repair. I always explain to people it helps bring the friction down really between the shop and the insurer to understand what is the scope. If somebody is in a rear end incident and then there's some code having to do with the front of the vehicle, understanding the scope of that repair and having that documentation of, okay, that was here going in. It's clearly not caused by the collision incident. So that's a separate discussion.
Absolutely. Now, what about from a customer perspective? I know, I think you and I have both had some personal, especially with kind of our historical knowledge or our knowledge of diagnostics, some personal experiences and damage repair and wanting to know what's going on the inside. How do you think creating kind of transparency about diagnostics, even with the customer, it affects that experience?
Oh, absolutely. At every stage of aftermarket repair, and just it's not unique to collision. Customers, vehicle owners, they want transparency into that process. In the more transparency it is, the less stressful that process is for them, and the more that they trust that result. And in fact, having a team driver, I'm immersed in the collision industry as we speak. I have a car in the shop today because I have a 16-year-old driver that made a friend with my garage. So, and the transparency to the process is important, and getting that repair printout and what exactly is being done. There's a run repair shop that I often joke about that he actually has webcams in, and he allows people to kind of look in when they question what's going on. So we're talking, this is any kind of digital signature you have on the vehicle increases that transparency, helps give that customer that peace of mind, and leads to better retention on the shop perspective. I mean, that not just collision, but all across the aftermarket. Retention of those customers is really critical, and offering transparency is the key way to accomplish that.
Totally agree. And I think a lot of times there's some fear of being too transparent and having the customer know too much. But, so far, what we've seen as we have evolved into the world of technology, more and more transparency brings more confidence, right? And the businesses that you're interacting with, knowing that they are taking the time, they have the technology, they know what's going on with my car, and therefore they likely know how to properly repair my car.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a critical piece. So many people view vehicle repair issues with fear, frankly.
Yeah.
And there are whole marketing campaigns that pursue that emotion of fear, and transparency builds that trust for sure.
Totally agree. I had a vehicle go in for repair, and I asked the question, what diagnostically was wrong with the car? What, did you do a pre and post scan? And I was shown a picture on a cell phone of the tablet, the technician's tablet that was taken from the back of the shop, which was, of course, barely readable, and just didn't give me all that much confidence that they had, all the tools that that they need for the customer experience and for the repair. But let's talk a little bit about the tools, because again, we've established there is a difference between the pre and post scan and the actual repair process and calibration, right? So to that same extent, do the tools differ? And let's look, kind of historically, have the tools been the same? Have they been different? And, how has that evolved over time?
Well, the tools differ quite a bit. We discussed, some of these consumer grade devices as being kind of check engine light readers. And check engine light exceeds 60% of the issues that a consumer is going to run into. They're more than that on the issues that prevent a car from going down the road. So when you think of a DIYer, they think they're more focused on keeping their car going down the road. If there's some running board lamp code on it, they're not likely to repair that. They're likely to leave it unrepaired. So the consumers go for lower end devices that are really keeping the car on the road, and that's the mission. But we're talking about, making a vehicle to the OEM specification, if you will, for safe release back into the hands of a consumer that wants a trouble-free car operating at its intended capabilities. And those are much higher end tools that can interrogate these systems. Of course, there's OEM tools that can do this, and then the OEM make their licensed data available to tool makers for reauthoring into a multi-branded tool. So, a GM, General Motors diagnostic tool can only diagnose General Motors vehicles, and a Ford can only diagnose Ford vehicles, and it's really, really expensive to do that.
Right.
A Ford dealer typically only sees Ford vehicles. He just needs the Ford tool. He buys it from the OEM themselves. Whereas the aftermarket shop, and collision shop, they see all makes. They need a tool that can do all makes. They need a tool that uses OEM licensed data to have the identical experience, the identical capabilities from a read codes perspective that the OEM tool has, and that's the choice of the day for the collision shop or any shop that needs to do multi-brand diagnostics. It's simply not feasible to have an OEM tool and run your shop in any kind of profitable manner. So the OEM tool market is a small piece of the market because of that.
Sure.
And the aftermarket multi-branded tools is a thriving industry because most of them use OEM license data to create the capabilities of an OEM tool.
Got it. Now, even in the aftermarket, the tools have kind of split into a couple of different categories, right? So it used to be you had the big diagnostic tablets and the big OBD2 connector, sometimes corded, sometimes cordless. But they were much more for interrogating the individual sensors in the vehicle. You could also do a pre and post scan, but now we've kind of separated tools, right? So we have the pre and post scan tools, which are more focused on that initial health check versus the diagnostic and repair and calibration tools, which have much more power in them and much more, let's say, coded cost. Yes, absolutely.
Much more cost.
Cost, size, weight.
You're talking a high-end Snap-on tool that could approach $10,000, and you're talking plus subscription. So $10,000 for hardware plus subscription. First year is typically free on these devices. The lower-end tools that specialize in inspection, in having the ability to interrogate all those modules is really a new capability at some new price points. Having these available in a mobile operating system so they're really lightning fast is really the key to rapid interrogation of a vehicle. I mean, to go through all the modules on a vehicle is something that it isn't just a button and it appears. It's not like loading a web page. It can take 3 minutes on average. In some outlier vehicles, there's some Hyundais in the market that can take 9 minutes to meticulously go through every data bus on the vehicle and individually interrogate every module on that vehicle. But 9 minutes is an outlier for time. With some of the bigger tools, we call them the big screen TV. Oh my gosh, this huge screen TV in my car to do diagnostics. But those tools, you're right. They do calibration, relearns, if you will. They also not just interrogate individuals. It can actuate individual sensors, and that's really when you're doing the hardcore diagnostics itself, not just what's wrong, but now the next level of, it's a simple example. The window doesn't roll up. Is it the fault of the switch? Is it the fault of the wiring? Is it the fault of the controller? So by sending that command out on the CAN bus, you can begin to narrow your diagnostic search.
Yep.
So that's beyond just interrogating, but actually sending commands out on that bus to emulate a controller, if you will.
Right.
It's really in the hands of a highly skilled professional, the appropriate tool, but massive overkill to do pre-post scan.
Right. And so those tools, for a shop that deals with a lot of newer vehicles, those tools are still going to be needed, but it's kind of the right tool for the right job, right? I mean, the technicians, I can't imagine that they would appreciate estimators going back, stealing their, heavy duty, expensive technicians equipment and coming up to do a pre-scan on a vehicle, right? It's not the right tool for the right job.
Yeah, the modern day technician is utilizing tools at their disposal. So before modern day tools, there was these huge boxes and with analyzers and oscilloscopes and multimeters, and you would individually test every component to confirm failure. The modern technician is prioritizing their diagnostic strategy with experience-based tools. I think Solera's Identifix has a great asset that with a code, you can better understand what the likely problems are, kind of ranked by probability. So it's really increased the skill, increased the capability in the shop with the tools at their disposal like that.
Yep.
But these newer tools that do focus on pre-post scan, they don't require the skill level that the higher tools do. They don't require the training. They're a pretty simple mobile app. You download it online at any of the popular app stores, Google or Android, and the interface, it's designed and specialized on pre and post scan so that an entry-level person can really correctly perform a professional diagnostic session on that vehicle.
Sure. And if we relate that back to, I always love going kind of back to the medical industry as well, because there's a lot of similarities on kind of technology and introduction. So for instance, you can now, measure your pulse and your oxygen levels with just a little device that goes on your fingertip, right? So you don't really need any special training. You don't need, to steal a bunch of big, heavy equipment, literally a little wireless dongle, if you will, that sticks on your finger, reads all of the stuff automatically of what's going on, right? So same thing in the auto space. Plug in the OBD2 adapter, much smaller than it was in the past, much more intelligent, and with an iPhone app, they can get a full view of what's going on the inside of a car.
Yeah, it's super simple. There's been this debate of the need for increased training in technicians, and I agree with that. But at the entry level technology, it's making it easier than ever for low training capability individuals, we call them C-level technicians, entry level technicians, to complete a professional diagnostic session. Much like, my grandmother can load a web page and she has no idea what she's doing on a phone, right? So technology is enabling amazing things at the shop. It really having the shop have this capability rather than outsource diagnostics is a clear path to improving shop profitability.
Excellent. Well, we're going to continue talking about diagnostics and get into some of the OEM position statements and some of the kind of stresses between the customer, the shop, and the insurer. But right now, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this message. To learn more about Solera's vehicle health check solutions for pre- and post-scan diagnostics, visit identifix.com/VHC. Discover how our new mobile tool with over 30 years of integrated diagnostic repair data can help your business thrive in today's digital age. All right, welcome back to the show. We're going to jump right back into vehicle diagnostics with Jim Fish here. So let's talk about OEM position statements. We talked a little bit about the evolution of tools and how you have the new evolving pre- and post-scan tools, which are much more accessible now to the collision estimators in the field, so they don't have to steal the diagnostic tablets. But there's still this fight going on, or this this question of, do I need the OEM tools, or can I get away with an aftermarket tool?
Yeah, that's something that, the collision industry is newer to the role of diagnostics in proper repair. Mm-hmm. There's been position statements and even the OEM repair information that has called for the utilization of OEM tools. But the OEM tools, of course, they can't be required. The only time they can be required is in servicing warranty for a dealer. And that's to ensure a warranty procedure is completed. In the aftermarket, those are their simple way of saying when a scan should be performed. And frankly, the position statements do vary quite a bit. Some call out an OEM tool, others do not. And that's really, it's a personal level decision at the OEM. And
sure.
My own personal interpretation is that many OEMs don't want to take the risk of endorsing anything but their own, because if there is a problem, they have to support that. It's much like for reflash, there would be tools that would be endorsed or approved, and those that wouldn't. But many tools can perform a reflash function, as an example. So really, the collision industry is now just coming into the placement or the integration of diagnostics with a proper repair. And so these are issues that have been floating for 30 years in the aftermarket shop. So, an OEM is not making a mandate. They are not making a requirement. But in the case of warranty repair, they can make that mandate because they're the customer. They're paying the bill.
Sure. They own the ecosystem in that case.
Yeah, they tend to stretch their net out and be conservative in their calls. But as any aftermarket shop will tell you, that when they can follow their repair information, literally the General Motors published repair information calls for, say, a Tech 2 to perform this procedure, and everybody knows that that's not how it happens in reality. Right. But oftentimes these are just their language of discussing a repair.
Right. And I think another thing that I've heard in the industry is, the third party aftermarket tools are almost being looked at as kind of hacking tools, right? Like, oh, somebody must have reverse engineered what the OEM is doing, and that means that they're not going to catch everything. But that's really that's really a misnomer in the industry. There is published information. You have to find it. You have to subscribe to it. You have to go through a lot of hoops, and it's very technical and detailed information. But the OEMs do publish the information needed to run the diagnostics in a third-party tool, correct?
Yes, that's correct. There have been some interesting cases that you can find if you Google hard enough. Some issues that OEMs have had with certain Asian providers of devices, I'll say, in their questionable heritage of capability. But every reputable diagnostic solution is produced via licensed OEM data. That data is made available willingly from the OEMs via various methods, but the Equipment and Tool Institute, or ETI, is a clearinghouse of that data. It's kept securely on AWS. Solera is a member of this that where the OEM data is available. So this is not it's not hacked out. It's truly the licensed OEM data. So to recreate the OEM capability on what's called just generically a multi-brand tool.
Sure. And access to that data, it's accessible, but it's not cheap. It's not easy. So some people choose to go the let's say that the less costly route. But to your point, there are good tools out there, and then there are questionable tools. So
it's not cheap. It's individual licenses and individual pricing. It's definitely not easy. They come in disparate formats. Some of them come in, say, to get techie HTML flat files, and some of them are almost handwritten on a napkin. So there's vast disparity in what they are. The support from the OEMs from this is not great. It takes the deep capability to do this, and it's really why these devices cost so much, because it's significant technical sophistication to be able to reauthor this data.
Right. Got it. Okay, so pre and post scan, and I know I'm hitting on that a lot, but it's a controversial topic in the industry right now. So, insurers aren't quite sure when to pay for pre and post scan. Shops aren't quite sure if they want to do pre and post scan on every vehicle. There's the OEMs involved. So where do you think the industry is going with pre and post scan?
Yeah, and again, I draw the correlation back to the general repair or the mechanical repair industry, where when diagnostics first came out, it was outsourced, and then when the volume became overwhelming, they began to grow diagnostic experts. Now, this was the early and late 80s, and the next wave that washed over was reprogramming or reflashing, and again, those were outsourced until the volume became enough so that the shop could improve their profitability by insourcing it. Pre and post scan in the collision industry, to me, it's a very similar path of technical adoption. You're going to see shops initially, even pre and post scan, which can be done probably by my 16-year-old son. In fact, he's done a pre and post scan with equipment. So it takes very low skill level, very little training to perform pre and post scan. But today, yet shops continue to outsource it because perhaps they don't know about solutions that are out there, or the volume isn't such that they can improve their profitability by just bringing that in-house. So I see the future of this, the volume of pre and post scan, the volume of calibrations is not going to go down.
Right.
In fact, the calibrations alone, my studies indicate a compound average growth rate of around 30%, like for the next 6 years. And this is just as more sophisticated vehicles get out there and become part of the collision mix. And pre and post scan is going to see that similar growth. So this is going to really change the face of the industry again. But I think it's been seen and done and accommodated and integrated and adopted many, many times in the past, and it's led to every time it leads to opportunities for the shops and frankly a safer cleaner vehicle returned back to the consumer.
Yeah, it's almost, I mean, if you go way back in time, look at collision estimates and how they were documented. I mean, it wasn't until digital cameras became cheap enough and became mainstream that photos really were required as part of every documentation of the estimate, right? You document what needs to be done, but then you also document the photos, to make sure that you have proper transparency. And now we have to document what can't be seen, which means we have to use special tools like pre and post diagnostic tools.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think the cost of the technology is continuing to come down. I mean, you don't need a $3,000 tool to do pre-scan, post-scan. I mean, a shop might be looking, I can get a pre-scan, post-scan outsource call, and it takes me a little while. I got to call back. I got to buy this expensive piece of hardware, or maybe it's a buy the drink thing. And I understand the need for that capability. I understand, but right now I'm just outsourcing it. As that volume grows, that will be
got to bring it in house.
No question in my mind, it'll be brought in.
Yeah, because I mean, it would be silly to think of calling an outsourced resource in to take photos of your car, and that's essentially kind of the correlation that we're drawing now. I mean, for the $1 or $2 for a valid pre and post scan, why would you call outsource for that?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So demand is going up, the need is going up because of the complexity of the vehicles, the price is coming down because of technology. So it sounds like we're really in the kind of the S-curve adoption, if you will, of technology. We're really hitting that upward trend where you're foreseeing that this is going to have mass adoption here in the short term.
Yeah, I think it's an issue of awareness that the technology is there finally to do this at an affordable cost, where you begin to, it's tough when you're doing an outsource today, say $50 to $75 for a pre-post scan. I mean, full diagnostics is more, calibrations is more, and calibrations can go exceed $1,000 as an outsource.
Not to mention
with
the
all the
cycle
equipment
time.
with what's needed on the equipment side, and people look at, oh my gosh, even at the entry level, a $3,000, $3,500 tool, just easier right now to outsource that. But some of these new devices are coming in with really attractive models enabled by technology that's focused on the pre-post scan, that's focused on as a triage tool. It's not an MRI. It takes your pulse.
Yep. Excellent. Now, we do a pre and post scan. We have the data. We see the diagnostic codes. What do we do next with it, though, right? I mean, the collision industry isn't used to looking at these codes versus other industries, let's say like the mechanical industry. So, what tools, what data sets are out there that kind of helps bridge that knowledge gap?
Yeah, I'd mentioned earlier we call them in the industry EBR, or experience-based repair, and it's looking at tens of millions of repairs that have happened out there, and helping people prioritize what they're going to look at with probability. This in a YMI, or year, make, model, engine, this DTC pairing, and then look at the probability, and it can be as much as 96% of the time it's this part, and then 3% of the time it's this part, and 1% of the time it's that part. So it really helps people narrow their focus, and again, allows a C-level technician to do things really unheard of just even a couple of years ago.
So we're bringing experiential information from the mechanical industry, where they're used to the diagnostics, used to these post-warranty repairs for the failures. We're bringing that into the collision industry. Yeah,
exactly. And it's again it's really been only in play even in the mechanical industry for about 10 years. It's been pretty powerful in taking off, and this is really shortcutting the diagnostic process. You're still always going to have your edge cases. You're still going to have intermittent things that are extremely difficult. You're still going to have circumstances that arise that aren't generating codes. Those are always going to exist. Those are always problems and opportunities to solve. And there will be some role, perhaps, even in the collision environment for specialists to work on this. And those people are out there today. But you don't need a diagnostic specialist for pre-post scan, which are going to be
Right.
90+% of the issues, and 90% of the issues that are found can be solved very simply with experience-based repair assets. So, when you're talking overwhelming number of the issues that even a collision shop without a diagnostic specialist can solve,
Yep.
overwhelming number of those, and they're going to find that it's to their benefit to begin to have a person around that does that, and it
Right.
shouldn't be intimidating. You don't need to go grab a diagnostic specialist to do this, because frankly they'd be bored in a collision shop, because most of the diagnostics are simple. But rather get somebody that's comfortable using an iPhone, and I don't think that's too hard to do.
Sure. Absolutely. Now, do you also see, it's interesting because in the collision industry, we know that there's a shortage of talent, right? A shortage of people coming in versus the, professionals that are leaving the industry. So now that, vehicles are becoming more and more technology driven, now that we're talking more and more diagnostics, how do you see this affecting the workforce?
Yeah, it is a challenge. There's a technician shortage. If you talk about entries into the industry, we're running about 15 to 20,000 short a year. We talk total technician population, somewhere around 850,000. Right now, we're understaffed by about 75,000, and that's growing at 15,000 a year. And so it's an issue of training and making it more accessible for people. I think there is, with technology, it seems like people view high school, the vocational aspirations of people are different. I come from an area where I had shop class in high school, but that's really not a core part of the curriculum. People are looking at, maybe I can be a Java programmer instead. But now with the technology in cars, you'll find that people that are drawn to diagnostics are those people that are in the repair industry,
Right.
that really love being on the edge of technology. And we find that in the general repair industry, diagnostic specialists are the highest paid typically, but they're also, they're the highest paid. So people have aspiration to be that, but not so hard to find, because technicians are usually early adopters of technology. They've always been. And with this exploding sophistication, I'm optimistic that some of these trends can be reversed. You go to any conference and they're going to just bang the table of we're 75,000 short and it grows by 15,000 a year. And what are we going to do? And I like to think that, that this trend is slowing down and will reverse when technology becomes more the core of how to repair a vehicle and a little less about doing brakes.
Exactly. Not only technology in the vehicles drawing in the people, but also technology that they have to be more efficient at what they do, right? So you may need fewer people to do, the jobs of the manual jobs of the past.
Yeah, and in the collision industry, there's people there that I class as artists, right? People that some of these jobs are not just part swapping. I mean, there's art in the collision space, and there's not necessarily art. So I think there's a different way of thinking there. So I think maybe some intimidation with this technology, but I think hopefully it comforts them to look at the general repair space and look at how they've tackled these challenges again and again with technology evolutions, from a giant tray of oscilloscopes and engine analyzers and to set the points and multimeters, and then it went to a single brand diagnostic tool, and now we're migrating to a mobile OS driven small sensor and cloud connected solution that allows you to do some amazing things. And they've adopted these technologies. They've improved their profitability every step of the way by returning safer, cleaner vehicles. And I think this is also for the technology or the collision shops that thrive. Are going to be the ones that lean in on this technology.
Yeah, this is no longer bleeding edge. This is now leading edge into commonplace, right?
Yep.
So what final words, recommendations do you have for our listeners around pre-post scan diagnostics?
Yeah, I would say don't be intimidated by it. These technology waves. I mean, I think about when aluminum bodies washed through the collision industry. What did they do about it? They bucked up. They made the investments. They got the training. And they viewed it as a profit improvement opportunity. And in most cases, I would hope, it was just that. Diagnostics is yet another technology that offers profit opportunity for the shop. And to outsource these, it's a short-term thing. I understand, to get comfortable with what's going on and what kind of volume do I have and what is my business for doing this. But to not be intimidated by this, because this is doesn't require training. These solutions these newest solutions, these newest cloud-connected technology solutions are really designed for that market, that user, that simple, lower-cost way to interrogate that vehicle, to comply with the requirements of the OEMs and of the insurers, and to make that a profit opportunity for the shop. And those shops that like with anything are the early and mid-level adopters of this technology, are those that are going to thrive.
Excellent. So adopting technology, adding profitability, not necessarily adding cost in the system, because costs are coming down all around. So Excellent. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate you joining me today. Your knowledge, you're always insightful, and it was great talking with you.
Yeah, it was good fun as well. Anytime, Neil.
Excellent. And thanks to our listeners for tuning in. I hope this conversation was helpful and gave you some useful tips for running your business. Join me next time on Ready, Set, Go here on Solera Innovation Labs. Solera Innovation Labs is a podcast produced by Solera, a global leader in data-driven solutions and services. Solera collects and translates complex data into actionable insights for automotive, identity, and property partners across 90 countries and counting. Learn more at solera.com or find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.